what's crazy is like if you read the Bible, there's not a white narrative. You would think that the Bible was tailored to this specific race, or the places that it talks about, the settings, the people. It's so far from that. So it trips me out. Is like if you read and look at it in the context, you would see that what you've been told is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think some people, won't have the effort to do that.
Well, thank you for watching another episode of the Jude 3 Project podcast. As always, I'm your host, Lisa Fields, the founder of the Jude 3 Project. And today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Brian Miller, a.k.a. B. Dot from Rap Radar. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, Lisa, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Big fan.
Thank you for agreeing to do the podcast. One of the reasons I was like, I got to get him on the podcast is I saw your interaction with Killer Mike on White Jesus and Christianity. And that's something that we deal with a lot with the Jude 3 Project, this notion that Christianity is a white man's religion. And why it has been misused. You pointed out one of the things that we try to point out about Christianity in North Africa before it hit Europe. Before we get into all of that, give our audience just a little bit of background about who you are.
Okay, my name is Brian B. Miller. Like you said, I am the host of the Rap Radar podcast, which is on the Tidal platform. I also work at Epic Records. I'm the guy that's responsible for streaming. I'm a journalist by trade. I graduated from Delaware State University. And I've been doing music journalism for 15 years. This past year makes 15 years.
That's awesome. And I know that I'm assuming this is something I saw in the comments when we announced that you were going to be on the podcast, that you were passionate about talking about the intersection of hip hop and Christianity. Why does that excite you?
Because I'm saved, and I want to express the gospel of Jesus Christ to as many people as possible, and that excites me. And also, I believe there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to Christianity, and I feel like it's people like myself and others who have platforms to try to kill the noise.
Mm-hmm. So, in your interaction with hip hop artists, kind of what is their biggest stumbling block when they think about Christianity?
Well, I feel like for a long time, it's taboo. People don't like to talk about politics or religion. And, when you touch those kind of hot button topics, people get, riled up in their emotions. So, I try to, tread lightly as much as I can. But, if the conversation does come up, I'm more than eager to express my views and how I feel about it.
Mm-hmm. When do you hear a lot of in your spaces that Christianity is the white man's religion?
Absolutely. I've heard that even before I, became saved. I just think, like I said, there's a lot of misconceptions, and it's wrong because, like, the people that have the most criticism probably have never read the Bible. They're just parroting what they hear from other people, what they see on memes, what they might have glanced on the internet. And it's like, if you actually read the Bible in its context, it will tell you that it doesn't even says anything about, European features or anything like that. Like, it just boggles my mind as how this narrative has been dissipated throughout the world,
mm-hmm.
especially in hip hop.
Mm-hmm. So how do you kind of go about dispelling that notion in conversation when it comes up?
Well, I just try to be as prepared as possible. In my own private time, I study, the word. I listen to a lot of sermons. I do my own research. So, when I am confronted with someone that's skeptical about the Christian faith, I'm prepared and I know how to, respond to their questions, because a lot of times the inquiries are often the same. What I've realized, people say the same things over and over again. But when you study and you have the tools, you know how to defend yourself.
Mm. What has been the response you've had with you sharing things about Christianity in Africa and just sharing the word in context?
Yeah, it's overwhelming. Like, since when you posted it and prior to then, people have hit me up. A lot of people didn't even know I was saved, or I had I was, into the faith like that. So I got a lot of DMs. I got a lot of emails. Like, yo, thank you for saying this and speaking out on, this topic or this issue, I didn't know that you knew the Bible. I didn't know you knew verses like that. I'm like, I mean, listen, I'm not, I'm not a theologian,
Theologian.
theologian, but oh no, I'm not a pastor, but I know enough to get my point across. But the response has been overwhelming for the most part. Like, I like that.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And I think when we think about like theologians and scholars, a lot of them, while they have a lot of research, you're on the front lines engaging people every day. So the ways in which you flush out what you read is very important, because it often is more practical and tangible for people who are at work.
Absolutely.
Engaging people on these topics. So I think that's very vital. When it comes to the rappers, I loved in the Killer Mike interview how you talked about you wanted him to make a distinction between Christianity as a whole and white Jesus.
Yeah.
And I came to a consensus on it. Okay, we both agree that white Jesus is problematic, but that's not the overarching. That's a misinterpretation of Christianity.
Absolutely. I feel like, when it comes to the appearance of Jesus, I feel like that is the biggest distraction ever. Like, what Jesus looks like doesn't matter. He could be black, white, pink, green, polka dot. It doesn't matter. What really matters and the focus should be on is what his sacrifice was. And I think that sometimes gets lost. If we want to have that discussion about what Jesus' appearance is, we talk about it in the Bible. We talk about it 3 times. Talk about it twice in Isaiah, where they talk about the description of how mutilated his body and disfigured it was on the cross. They also talk about how, there was no majesty to him. They talk about he was a regular guy. There was nothing desirable about his appearance. And then, also in the book of Revelation, it talks about John's vision and how God looked at his full glory. That's the only 3 times of, descriptions are made in the Bible. And I think there were so many disciples and apostles and so many eyewitnesses around Jesus, is that if it was important, it would have been included. And I don't think that was important. What's important is the sacrifice. And I think that's what needs to be dissipated.
Mm-hmm. I know one of the things that in the interview Killer Mike was saying was his grandmother hiding the Black Jesus portrait. And often when we do an HBCU tour called "Is Christianity White Man's Religion?" And when we talk to students during the panel discussion, them seeing the color of Jesus, trying to see a savior that identifies with them. Mm-hmm. Color wise, sometimes is important, sometimes isn't, depending on the student. Mm-hmm. So it definitely, I think the white Jesus narrative is kind of one of the most challenging for hip hop and millennials, just because of how white supremacy has tried to hijack Christianity.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the word has been perversed. I think the idea or the image of a white Jesus is just one man's interpretation of what he thinks the Savior looks like. And, it's crazy. It's like, if you read the Bible, there's not a white narrative. You would think that the Bible was tailored to this specific race, or the places that it talks about, the settings, the people, it's so far from that. So it trips me out. Is like, if you read and look at it in the context, you would see that what you've been told is a lie. Mm-hmm. But I don't think some people won't have the effort to do that.
Mm-hmm. In addition to, I know the white Jesus challenge that people pose as it relates to Christianity, and I've heard it expressly in hip hop, but I've also heard the hypocrisy narrative. That Christians are hypocrites.
Yeah.
A little bit of your interview with Jay-Z, he touched on his interaction with, how his grandfather's hypocrisy affected his view of Christianity. Yeah. Have you seen that consistently with hip hop artists, and how do you engage with
hip hop artists and just everyday people, friends? I had a conversation with a friend yesterday about something like this. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about being a Christian is that we're perfect. People look at us as if, we're infallible, we're not doing this. It's like, no, I'm just as bad as you. You know, I am a dirty, wretched sinner. The difference is that I'm saved by grace, which, thank God. Um, I tell people all the time, we sin in thought and in action, and it's impossible not to stop sinning. It's in our nature, it's in our DNA. So it's like telling a dog not to bark. You know, that's just who we are. The difference is that I don't have those desires to commit those sins like how I used to. It's like I still, until I die, I am going to sin. And I think people don't understand that, because it's like when you're born. I always say, when you're born once, you die twice. Born twice, die once. And being that I'm born again and I'm God's child, I don't have that sin. To Him, I'm perfect. I'm still going to mess up. I'm still going to slip up, and I'll be chasing for it, whether it's here or when I get to heaven. But in the meantime, I'm just trying to live as righteous as possible. I'm not trying to, be malicious or anything like that. I want to live as Christ-like as possible. It is impossible for me in this nature, but I try my best. And I think that people need to understand that Christians aren't perfect. We are fallen people. We have the capacity and the abilities to sin at any moment. It doesn't make me less of a Christian. But I do believe that we have a responsibility to, live as righteous as possible, and to show others that, we can be good people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely important. I always say hypocrisy isn't the presence of sin, it's the absence of honesty.
Right.
And so people are really, sometimes when they think about Christians being hypocrites, they think about Christians being dishonest or being one way at church and being one way at home. It's funny though.
That's just human nature. It's like, yeah, I'm saved, but I'm still a bad person, and I'm not proud of that. But that's just who we are as people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think people don't realize that there is still a sin nature that exists, and there's a war between the two. But I think it's interesting that critique is given for us, for Christians today, when we live in the social media age, where the same people who talk about people in the church being hypocrites, also their whole social media timeline is hypocrisy.
It's snake eating its tail. I told someone the other day, I said, listen, if you hate somebody, you don't like somebody, you, in Jesus' eyes, you commit murder in the heart. It's impossible. I don't like everybody, but it's impossible not to, feel the way you do. So I can understand why people say that, but again, that's just a misnomer. It's just wrong.
Mm-hmm. I know another challenge Christians engaging people about faith is this notion that, especially in the Black context, that the Bible pushes on to us forgiveness, and forgiveness is for the weak. Forgiveness, it's kind of like they want us to forgive them so they don't have to deal with the fact that they oppressed us. Mm-hmm. We don't need to turn the other cheek. We need to fight back. And so that's kind of a narrative that I've heard, that it's a tool to oppress us. Have you engaged in that at all?
Yes, of course. I've talked to people. The Bible is a slave manual to teach slavery. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. People have this misconception that the slavery in the Bible is the same slavery that was in North America in 1619 all the way to 1865. And I tell them that slavery in the Bible was more so indentured servitude. It wasn't necessarily based off race. It was because people were in debt. They couldn't afford to pay back certain people and things like that. In fact, the Bible opposes slavery in the book of Exodus and in Jeremiah. It talks about, how if a man is found in someone else's hand, they should be put to death. It talks about how, Moses' people got out of Egypt because of discrimination. So it's like, no, if anything, the people that I would say the people that in bondage our ancestors, they were wrong for that. And what they did was use the Bible for their own personal interests and perverse the word. It's the same way of how I could use a knife to cut some food, or I could use it to stab somebody. It doesn't make the knife wrong; it makes the person wrong. Um, but I do believe that, through that tragedy, uh, it's something glorious came out of it. A lot of people converted to the faith. And again, if you read the Bible, it doesn't tailor a white narrative. You know, people just like to pick and choose and bastardize the word for, like I said, their own personal interests. So when people say things like that, it just perplexes me, because I'm like, if you actually read the word and study the Bible and talk to somebody that is more qualified and knowledgeable than you would understand that what you've been told is a lie.
Mm-hmm. And I love how you keep pointing back to the fact that you have to actually read it before you critique it.
Yeah,
because
sometimes things get taken out of context, and some things are necessarily black and white. Like it's more gray than anything. But if you read, you can understand and have a better understanding of what the word is. Because at the end of the day, the Bible is just a love letter. It's just God's word. We didn't have iPhones back then. We didn't have Google Hangouts. They had scrolls and whatever writing utensils they had to document what was going on every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's helpful, because I think we treat Christianity like terms and conditions. I know when they update the terms and conditions on iPhones, I never read them. I just agree to it, and they can put something in there that completely undercuts me. But I don't think anybody ever read it. We just say I agree and keep going. And I think we do the Bible the same way. We're like, I want to sign up for Christianity. Sign me up. Have you ever read? Did you read it? Yeah, sure. And you hear things about the scripture and you're like, that sounds really weird. But you never put it in context to the whole book, the 66 books. Right. And then you have these doubts, and then people can manipulate you easily. Right. So I think it's very, very important that we increase our biblical literacy amongst Christians. And if you're going to critique Christianity, at least read the book in which you're critiquing from cover to cover.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more.
So what else would you like to share for those who, Christians and people who want to engage people in hip hop, or just people in general that struggle with being a Christian in spaces that aren't necessarily always welcoming to believers? What are some things that you've learned along the way that you think would be good methods? Because we don't want people to be like, either people don't share at all or they just overdo it and it's just too much.
Right.
What have you learned along the way?
I learned that Christ is love, man. Like, his sacrifice, and if you trust in him, you'll be good. Like, it's like, I often think about eternity. I think about death, and those are things that are inevitable. Like, death is guaranteed, and I think about it a lot because you never know the time, the hour, the place where it's going to come, and you want to be prepared. And what I've learned from Christianity is that it's given me it's almost like an instruction manual of how to live your life. It's not necessarily for something that's condemning me. It's not something that's keeping me bondage. It's talking about preparing you for the inevitable. And that's how I look at the faith. People look at there's a lot of different faiths out there of religions. I call them religions because what I learned about Christianity is that it's not necessarily religion. I know it's classified as that, but it's a faith. I look at religion as traditions and practices, and you do this to get that. Christ didn't work for us. It's nothing I can do to please God. I mean, besides live a righteous life, but there's nothing I could do. There's not enough money or not enough philanthropy I could do to get into heaven. No, Christ did it for all of us, for everyone in this planet. Christ died for you, and that love to me is just like, it's almost gobsmacked. Did this for me, and I just wish that everyone has that chance and that ability to understand that. I think about Kendrick Lamar a lot because on his first album, Good Kid, Mad City, he had a prayer for salvation, and that album sold millions of copies. And I think about all those people that listened to that album, that intro, and I'm like, wow, Kendrick probably saved more souls than the local pastor, just with that one prayer in the intro. And I just think that if we practice what was said in the book of Mark, where to all nations, we'll be better off. And yeah, I know I'm rambling, but I just have a lot of ideas in my mind. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
And I just know that hip hop is a powerful tool, and I just feel like with uh, the more I learn and study in my faith, I just want to be able to get that message across on whatever platform, whether it's subtly or just blatantly. I just want to get that message out to you that Christ saves, Christ loves you, and will never forsake you. Say he'll never pluck you out of his hand, and I believe that.
That's awesome. I have one final question. Are you good on time?
Yeah, okay.
So there's Christian hip hop. You have like your Lecrae, Andy Mineo, Tedashii Trip Lee. And so how do you think that is received in mainstream spaces? Are people open to it? Do they want to hear? Do they want to like internalize the message, or is it kind of like,
I kind of cringe a little bit when I hear the term Christian hip hop, because it's like, would you define someone else as a Muslim rapper? You know what I mean? Like, I just believe that, they're just people that love God. Would you call Kendrick Lamar a Christian rapper? Like I said, he opened up his album with a prayer. Would you call Chance the Rapper a Christian rapper? No, they're just people that are Christian. So I cringe when people, classify them. And it also doesn't give the art a chance to be the art. It's already put into a box. But I do believe that, people are being a little bit more receptive of their music. If they want to brand new, he's constantly touring and, reaching people. So I feel like people are a little bit more receptive to it. But it just something about that bothers me. I just don't want people's music to be confined to one space, because there's probably a theme or a trope in there that can apply to somebody who's a Muslim, but they're not going to get a chance to listen to it because they're already put off by that tag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's helpful. I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of Christian artists that have been labeled that are trying to take that label off and say, I'm an artist, right, and I am a Christian, but I don't want to have that label attached to me, because that only limits you to one category as far as like getting recognition, awards. You're pigeonholed
right,
into one space.
Right, exactly. And I think that could be a detriment to an artist's growth, and to people that want to hear a great message. So I just think that as long as they keep making great music, it's going to be heard by somebody, and hopefully it's heard by the right ears.
Mm-hmm. What would you like to leave our audience with, B-Dot?
What would I like to leave our audience with? Well, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at B.TM. I just want to, I'm a father as well. I just want to let people know that I love God, man. I love God. I just sometimes I find myself just, in awe of the blessings that have come to me. Like, I don't deserve none of it, And, sometimes I might break down and cry and shower just by myself. I'm just thinking, God, thank you for these blessings. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for everything. Thank you for just this. Thank you for opportunity. And I'm really appreciative of that. I just want my message to be dissipated to as many people that are willing to hear it. Christianity is not a white man's religion. It's a everybody religion. It's not even a religion. It's a faith. And, no matter what you're going through, Christ is there for you, loves you. And, his promises are guaranteed. Man lies, man fails, but Christ is undefeated. I'll leave it on that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I thank you so much for your time. I've enjoyed the conversation. And thank you for tuning into another episode of the Jude 3 Project. Here we're helping you know what you believe and why you believe it. And if you want to support the Jude 3 Project, go to jude3project.com, hit the donate tab. And remember, our national event, Courageous Conversations, is coming up August 1st and 2nd. 28 scholars and pastors from progressive and conservative backgrounds to discuss topics like hell, sin, preaching to Black millennials, It's 7 different topics, 28 different scholars and pastors. So join us. Go to courageouscombos.org to register. Thank you for tuning in. This has been.
Oh, just want to let people know, we are not perfect. Christians aren't perfect. We're sinners. Just letting people know. But we love you all no matter what.
Well, thank you. Even though you think Mace is higher on the totem pole than Styles P, I saw that that interview is following you a long way.
That was
fun.